All right.
All right.
How's it going, everybody? I'm AJ Dimmick. I'm the director of esports for the University of Utah's varsity program. We're here today to do a little workshop and talk about running a Rocket League team and what that kind of might be like, and kind of the things you might want to be aware of, and things to know if you're starting a Rocket League team and kind of running one, or already have one, and kind of what we would do on the collegiate level to kind of help improve your kids. Silva, introduce yourself. Tell everyone who you are.
My gamer name is Silva. My name is Jacob Peterson. I've been coaching the University of Utah Rocket League team for a few years now. Before that, I was on the team for one school year before I graduated. And I've been competing kind of competitively or coaching for years now. So that's my experience.
And we are in year 7 now of building these teams, and Silva's been here for over half of it now, which is which is a strange to think about it. It's kind of been a long time, and so
Yeah.
let's talk about let's get granular about like what it's like to form a Rocket League team, and every year it starts fresh and starts new, and we have to reform and kind of get those teams ready to play competitively pretty fast, as a matter of fact. So talk about that. Like if you were at a school like and trying to put together a team for the first time, what's the kind of thing that you would do like tryout wise to kind of find players and form a team? Or what kind of format would that look like, and what would you do? And we'll break it apart. We'll talk about like if they have facilities at school or if they have to do it all online. But what's the kind of thing you're looking for to do when you're just starting out?
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing is very basic. I mean, you want to be able to set a day and a time for whatever tryout you're conducting. And you want to make sure that you obviously give it as much attention or inform as many people as possible about said tryout. The next thing you want to do is it depends on how many people are actually trying out. If you have a smaller group of, let's say, 5 or 6 people, typically Rocket League is a 3 versus 3 game, and so you could pretty much run games with those 3 people again, or those 6 people, sorry, against each other and see how things go. If you have a larger turnout, then you may need to adjust things a little bit. So it really just depends. I think when you do start the tryout, actually, do you want to go into that now? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
okay.
Like what I'm curious about is just like so if you have 5 or 6 people that are coming in, or maybe 10 or 12, what's the format? Would you just have them play games against each other, and kind of take it from there, or how would you run that? How are you evaluating like who belongs on this team and who maybe doesn't?
Yeah. So there are a few things that I would consider. Primarily, my first concern, assuming that the team's goal is to compete at the highest level possible and it's not just to kind of play with your friends and see how you can do, then my first concern is how mechanical, how skilled are the individual players. That's kind of the first measurement that I want to look at, because I know at the collegiate level, the other universities are going to be fielding very strong players, and so you need to know that whoever you are starting on the roster is going to be able to compete to the best of their ability. So the first thing is just like baseline skill. The next thing is kind of chemistry, but also communication, how well the players can actually work with other people. Sometimes you can have a very gifted player, but they may not work well with others. And so if you have a team of 3 people like that, as skilled as they may be, they may not work super well together. And so being able to find people who are committed to improving, working together, but they also do have that baseline level of skill that we're looking for are kind of the main points that I want to check.
And so like if you were doing this in a room with them, and they're able to do it on campus, would you be physically there, just standing behind them, watching them play and listening to talk if they were there?
Yeah, so preferably, it would be a lot easier to run a tryout if you're all in the same room and you can kind of look over their shoulders, keep an eye on everybody, and kind of take some notes on who seems to be playing a little bit better or a little bit worse, what they could improve on. It's certainly a lot easier when you're all in the same room, but um, it's not too difficult if they have to be at home in their own setups. There are still things you can do.
What tools would you use if it were a home? How would you be evaluating them?
So if it were done with the players at their respective setups in their homes, the thing that I would do is have them, if possible, stream their gameplay through a desktop app called Discord. That can have plenty of people within a certain call, and then each of them can stream their perspective. So that's what I would do.
Cool. And can you talk about for a minute here, like we in gamer culture, it's frame rates are the better. Having a really expensive graphics card is the best thing in the world. Like having all these things, and everybody operates on the notion that we got to have these high end super rigs. But we know for esports games, those games are all designed to run on a toaster if they
Yeah.
if they possibly can. So can you talk about a little bit like what do you need to run Rocket League like at a good enough rate to
Yeah. Yeah, I think Rocket League is kind of a unique game. I think at the lowest level, the like minimum that somebody needs is just a console and a controller, and they'd be able to kind of compete to the best of their ability. With that said, I think in the gaming world, there's a general kind of consensus that PCs are slightly better. And so, if you do have a PC setup and a good monitor, then you're going to get a higher refresh rate. Meaning instead of like 30 or 60 frames per second, you're going to get upwards of 100 or 200 frames per second. Um, and that's going to play into very minor but significant, especially at the higher level you go, um, a significant difference in like how how seamless the game runs and how kind of responsive it is for the player themselves.
and it's in most esports at the highest level we on if you were playing Overwatch, you're playing any first person shooter game or League of Legends, a mouse and a keyboard is highly advantageous to being able to play. This is different in this game.
Yes, yes.
And so talk about
Um,
what are the preferred controllers and things that they play in with a lot of players.
Yeah, so most people use either a PlayStation or an Xbox controller. I think in the history of like professional Rocket League, maybe 2% of players have used a keyboard and a mouse. So it's certainly possible. It's just not kind of the preferred um, tech to use for the game. Um, Personally, I like to use a PS5 controller. I think that those work really well. But I know other people on the team have used Xbox and they prefer that. So
So it's just a comfort level thing. Whatever you play on all the time is what you want to use.
definitely, yeah. If you grew up playing Xbox, that's probably what you're going to want to use.
Are you at a disadvantage? Like if you're playing at school and all they have is 60 hertz monitors that they would have for class, or is that a competitive disadvantage, or how do you feel about that?
So it would depend on what the other's team setup was. I would say it's a minor disadvantage. I think if it's something that you've grown up playing on and it's something that you're used to, you may not even feel that. I think that the reason that I would say it's a disadvantage is because if you were to take that same player who has spent their time on the 60 frames and then put them onto a 140 frame um, monitor, then I think they would notice a difference and their like skill level would increase by a few percent. It wouldn't be drastic, but it would be a little bit noticeable.
When people play as a team, do you think what's the difference between three team members playing at home, playing in the same room together, and how is that a different dynamic?
Yeah, I think when you're playing in the same room, it can have two things. It can make any um, anything that needs to be discussed, if it's constructive criticism, anything that needs to be improved, that can be very easy. Just being in the same room, you can kind of just point it out. And the other thing I think that it does is that it can build more camaraderie, which I think in the long term is very important.
And when we're doing a tryout, like there's a lot of players, particularly like I can imagine it. We have it in college, but in high school too. Of when they're playing, when they're getting in ranked games, they're the best player that they have, and you can run into a situation where all of a sudden it's very new to you that you have to play really well to beat the other side, and so talk about tilting and like getting guys in the right mindset to maybe for very rare for them to compete against people that can stand up to them.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, it's true across esports, but I think in Rocket League in particular, it is very easy to tilt. Um, I think when you are setting up the team, like I mentioned earlier, I think one of the most important things that you can do with the players is to set whatever their goal is. If their goal is to just make a Rocket League team for their high school, compete in whatever events they can, and just have a good time, I think that's a great goal to have. But it's important to set that so that if one player thinks I'm the best player on the team, I want to win everything, like my goal is just to be the best or I'm not going to be happy, um, then that can really drag a team down. That can have a negative effect. So setting that goal of just like thinking of each other as a team, as one unit, and trying to improve together is a huge thing to set off the bat.
Last question about like when tryouts and like setting up a team. When
Yeah.
you're when you're looking at guys, do you differentiate between you might be the best player if we were playing in an important game today,
Mhm.
but I see other guys that I think if we invest time in might have a higher ceiling or those kind of things. How do you tell the difference between those two things? What does that mean?
Yeah, so I think sometimes, I mean, it depends on the skill gap between the players. If the skill gap is too big, then I think oftentimes you may just need to run with the player who is already at the higher level. Um, if I am looking for long-term growth, then one of the biggest things that I personally look for is how well the players communicate. Some players, when they play, they are very focused on just the game, and it becomes very hard to speak at the same time. And so when they do, when myself as the coach tells them like, hey, you need to speak up a little bit more. Your teammates aren't really hearing much from you. And then they have to spend a lot of mental energy thinking about what they're going to say, then their performance can then fall behind. So somebody who's very communicative and eager to improve, those are kind of the two things that I'm looking out for if I'm looking to have that player grow with me.
Expand about that a little bit about the ability just to play the game relative to just having communication, being able to tell people what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, communication is honestly one of the things that I constantly want my players to improve on. In Rocket League in particular, it's a game that is very fast paced. It doesn't reset every few minutes to the same spot like a Valorant or a CSGO or whatever, where you have a round, it stops, and then you go again. It's something that is nonstop for the duration of the game. And that means that things are constantly changing, and players need to be able to inform their teammates about what is going on, what they can do or what they can't do, um, and constantly providing that information so that we can all be on the same page. We don't have two people going for the same ball all the time, and that kind of stuff.
Talk about the most elementary strat in Rocket League. How do people play? What are rotations, and how do they do it?
Yeah. So, I mean, the most common strat, as people will say, is three-man rotations, which basically just means that everybody on the pitch needs to be able to do everything. You need to be able to attack, you need to be able to hold the midfield, and you need to be able to defend. Um, but along with that, you need to make sure that you're doing it in tandem with your other two players. One of the things that I try and tell my guys is to think about it as two and one. So you have two people who are either in the play, pushing up, and one person kind of sitting behind, or the opposite. You could have one person that's pushing up, trying to apply pressure in the opponent's end, and then two people kind of sitting back and making sure that if that person loses the ball, that we're still ready on defense. And so teams kind of switch between those kind of tactics, but for Rocket League in general, because it doesn't have those start and stop moments apart from kickoff, there isn't quite as much kind of planned plays as there are in other games. It's a lot more fluid. Um, and so, apart from that kind of three-man rotation or that kind of strategy of 2-1, the most kind of set play that people will talk about in Rocket League is the kickoff. And so, for that, it's really also important for the players to practice a variety of kickoffs that they can implement in the game.
Let's get to that now. We say we have our team now. We've picked we've picked our the people that are going to participate in our roster, and we've either picked three or we've picked three a sub,
Mhm.
whoever we think is the right team. Now that we're past that tryout, what does a week in the life of a Rocket League player look like? Like how you're gonna practice and you're gonna get together as a team and like what are you doing?
Yeah. So practices can be different. I think some nights it'll be a scrim where you'll set it up with another team. Typically, a scrim will be either an hour or you can set it for like a best of five or a best of seven, depending on how much time the other team has. It could be drills. Um, one of my favorite drills is doing kind of like a monkey in the middle, where if you have your team of three and then maybe one sub, um, then you would basically run a drill of it's one player versus the other three, but the three players have to pass one time between all of them before they can shoot. And the one person just has to basically touch the ball. And whenever they do, that resets it. The three players have to get another three passes, um, something like that. Or if you did a scrim the other night and let's say you don't have enough time, then you can do a replay review of some of those games where each of you can kind of look at it. You can switch between players' perspectives so you know why they did what they did, what they could have done differently to improve. Um, and so those are kind of like the main methods: scrims, replay reviews, or drills. Um, and then as a last resort, if you can't do any of those things, then ranked is always there for you. But
Right. Right. For when they meet together as a team, what is the composition of just playing a scrim in a game versus running drills? Like how much of each do you do?
yeah, I would say, I mean, scrims are going to be more beneficial in the long run because you're just getting more competitive experience. Whenever you play against an actual team that has some kind of foundation that they're building on, it's going to give you a more realistic experience to what it is when you're in an actual competition. That said, I think that nothing can quite improve a player like individual practice. So whether that's a 1v1, whether that is sitting in free play, and just kind of working on your own mechanics, nothing is going to improve you more as a player than worrying about your own skill set. So yeah.
Is there any? I'm curious about this. Is there a resource online where people can go like look and go see like what a drill or what a what what these kind of drills look like and when players improve or players that they can see what they practice?
Yeah, I'm sure on YouTube, I'm sure there are plenty of videos. In Rocket League itself, or there are training packs, which are basically just um, like a set of plays that people have created so that you can practice a specific skill. So that's one way that people will do it. If you're playing on console, I'm not sure if this option is available to you, but I know if you are playing on PC, then there are also workshop maps. One of those is called like a rings map, which is basically just where you can practice your aerial control, how you can control your car in the air. Um, and so that's one that's really popular. But yeah, there are a lot of YouTube videos where they'll go over those kinds of drills.
When you find a scrim partner, is it
Mhm.
important to find really good ones that are like you don't want to find a scrim partner of a team that can't stand up to you?
Yeah.
And do you want to find a scrim partner that is equal, or do you want to find one that you might blow you away, or how do you
Yeah.
kind of gauge what you want to do with when you have scrim partners?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you're trying to improve, you want to have the best competition possible for two reasons. One, even if they blow you out of the water, you're going to get to look at a replay of how they did that, and you can try and glean whatever information you can from that. The other thing is, if you don't have any experience playing against those guys, then when you do finally get up against them, you're going to struggle a lot. Um, so scrimming against teams that are better than you is super important. That said, I do think it's also nice to play some teams that are either at your level or beneath because it can give you an opportunity to practice things that you wouldn't otherwise. When you're playing against a team that's much better than you, you're just trying to do your best and kind of survive. But when you're playing somebody that's worse, you can feel a little bit looser and you can be willing to go for things that you usually wouldn't, and that can also prompt growth. So.
You guys find it? You try to sprinkle in a little bit of all those and find scrum partners that are a little bit across the board.
Yeah, definitely.
Very cool. So how often is it optimal to meet or for these kind of practices or what is the kind of ranked at home versus meeting as a team kind of thing? What is kind of ideal for that and might be
Yeah, I mean,
ideal for like youth esports?
yeah. So again, I do think this a little bit plays into the goals you've set for your team. Assuming it is to compete at the highest level, I would say that practicing as a team at least 2 to 3 times a week is probably necessary. But I think that there is going to be, no matter how much practice you guys have, you, you always need to put in time on your own. If you're only putting in time when you're practicing as a team, you're not going to be able to get up to the level that is necessary to compete with whatever teams you're looking to play against.
Cool. And talk about a little bit like we've set our tryout, we've found our team, we've practiced now for a little while as a team, we're getting better. What what is game day like? Like what is competition like, and what is the ritual like pre-game versus starting it, and how do what do you how do you run the team on the day of a competition?
Yeah, so usually on the day, we try and get on at least an hour, maybe an hour and a half before the match so that players can start to get warmed up. If you can, it is beneficial to try and get a scrim before the actual game time. That way, they're not just warmed up, but they're like in the mindset of the competitive game. So that's kind of how it starts. Once you do get into the match, um, personally, I think it's much more beneficial if there is a coach or that kind of role available to you. Um, then on that day, it's not so much about telling people what they could do better as it is. I mean, that can be part of it, but it's more about reminding them what it is that they've been practicing. Because when you get into game day, speaking from personal experience and watching players at the collegiate level, as much as you may practice for a month beforehand, when you get into a real game, stress is up, anxiety is higher, everybody feels pressure. And so the way that you play is going to change. And so reminding players what it is that they've been working on and what they have been improving on, and to just rely on that and trust that is a huge part of it. Trying to keep everybody in a good, positive mindset, not letting a goal that we concede or a loss in a series kind of get us down is just as important as like individually focusing on what you're doing.
And between games, like you talk about a little bit, but expand on that a little bit. Like, what is that conversation like? I mean, there's not much time. Like, there's gonna be
Yeah. Yeah, so in between each game there's usually only a minute, so you can only pack so much into it. I think one of the other things that as a coach is kind of your role to do is, apart from keeping your own players in a positive mindset, you can remind them the little things that they've been working on, like boost management or something like that. But the other end is trying to keep notes on what the other team is doing. Um, what is their kind of strategy? Are they trying to be super aggressive and kind of just like really put pressure on our end? Or are they noticing that, we aren't really controlling the ball, we're kind of hitting it away. And so they're just letting us do that, collecting the ball, and then, again, putting pressure on our side and potentially scoring. So trying to take notes on like what are the opponent's preferences, and then letting your players know so that they can make a mental note of that and try to counter whatever it is that that team is doing.
And what about post game? Like we've been in situations where I mean everything happens in the world. You reach up and beat a team nobody thought you could beat. You lose to a team that you should have beat. You play really well all day long, and then the bottom falls out. What is your role in post game too? Like, are you evaluating gameplay right there, or what are you doing right after a game?
Yeah, so I mean, it depends. I mean, sometimes if it's a really demoralizing loss, it can be hard to look at it right after. So on days like that, I may say like, "Hey guys, like good job. Like we tried. We didn't quite live up to like our expectations, but that's fine. We just need to kind of review this. We can do that tomorrow or the day after, whenever you've got time. Um, and look at that replay and go over it. Or if it was a really close game and there's like specific moments that stand out as like this is something that we've gone over, let's just look at it real fast and try to make this a very clear example of either what to do or what not to do. That can be really helpful to kind of have that immediate feedback. And same thing if it went really well. I mean, if you did just have a blowout game, maybe it's not super beneficial to look at that replay. I mean, it could be depending upon how close it is and all that. But yeah, I think those are generally how we would handle it.
So, kind of the last thing that I want to touch on for a few minutes is the collegiate ecosystem and like what players that are in high school who aspire to like they're going to go to college and they're interested in participating on that level. Like for people that don't know anything about what the collegiate ecosystem is in Rocket League, describe how it works and kind of what are the parties involved and kind of how college works out.
Um, well, so I can only really speak for the U because that's been my experience.
I mean like CRL.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah,
like just going into Rocket League for CRL?
yeah.
Okay. So for Rocket League at the collegiate level, typically it is announced towards the beginning of the semester, usually in the first month, for when qualifiers will be. Um, Qualifiers typically include upwards of 100, 150 different collegiate teams that then get boiled down to 16 by the end of both qualifiers typically. So there's a lot of competition between all the teams. And another part of that is that as players are getting better and better, there are also a lot of semi-professional or professional players that are also involved in CRL. So competition is very high. Um, if the team does qualify for CRL and you are part of the top 16, then you'll go on to a kind of round robin where each team will play each other once, and then you'll have your record by the end of that. You could be 16-0, or you could be 0-16 or 0-15, I suppose. And so it just depends. From there, if you do qualify past that, then it'll go on to a national division where the top few teams from the West and the top few teams from the East will play each other. And then from there, it'll go on to a world championship if you make it.
Right. Just to add my 2 cents on this,
Yeah.
there are two ways to look at Rocket League. It is, I would say that just like high school, it is the most ubiquitous college esport that is kind of transfers to every single school with everybody and their dog participating, and it is
Mhm.
excellent. The downside it runs a little different than all the other college esports. That for most schools, your season is over officially in 2 weekends, and what is the championship recognized part of collegiate esports because you have to make those qualifiers to do it.
Yeah.
The other part about that is what's strange in collegiate esports is you qualify, you're top 16 in the West, and then
Hmm.
you have a really weird record in round robin being top 16 in the West because you're playing everybody else that's really good. And so,
Yep.
so it's a strange thing. It's one of the most evolving ones we have, but also viewership. If you look around college esports, is the highest in Rocket League of all the games that are played, and
Yeah.
so it's uh it's maybe the strongest game with the strongest future for people to invest in, and it's like for every other game you can see a life cycle, sort of you can see a beginning, middle, and end with everything except
Hmm.
League is eternal. um
Yep.
but I kind of think Rocket League is eternal as well, and its role in collegiate esports is always been, when you're introducing it to populations that aren't familiar with this at all, soccer with cars translates in 15 seconds
Yeah.
rather than what people are trying to do. So like it's a really important game, and it's an awesome one to get into. What is the average level of our players?
So our level, I would say, is generally between Grand Champ 2 and SSL. At least to be on the team, on one of the starting rosters. We do have three teams at the U. The third string team, I would say, is closer towards like GC1. But I would say, yeah, anything at the collegiate level that needs to be GC or up to realistically compete.
You know, a little bit like there's a really enthusiastic collegiate community, like just locally, like between the schools. Like our schools like love it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so like there's lots of teams being fielded, and there's at least on the club level, there's a community at every in-state school here of people that are enthusiastic about it. So no matter where you're going or what you're participating in, you go to a college campus, the Rocket Leaguers aren't that hard to find. And
Yeah.
so it's a definitely a booming community. Okay, let me ask you this last question before we wrap up. Is there
Yep.
anything about running a team that I haven't touched on, or you want to talk about with kind of getting into it? What have I missed?
Let me um I think I don't know if there's anything that you missed. I think I really do want to emphasize that setting a goal for the team is one of the most important things, because if the players themselves have a different goal in mind, then there's going to end up being some strife, some kind of tension between the players. And so having that clear goal, establishing it early and working towards that together, I think is one of the best things that you can do for your team.
That's great. All right, that's kind of what all that I have. Like recording this, but like if you have questions for us, like we're not hard to find for everybody involved in the Ken Garff Esports League. So reach out to us if we can follow up and do things for you, and appreciate it. Thank you so much, Silva. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.